I never thought my worst nightmare would come from the very people who were supposed to protect my neighborhood. The HOA president stood in front of my house waving a violation notice like a weapon, telling me my service dog had no right to sit in a chair at the clubhouse, and if I didn't comply, I could lose my home. Imagine that, being threatened with eviction not because of noise, not because of trash, but because of the dog who keeps me alive. That's where this all began. My name's Cole Mercer. I'm a veteran, and like a lot of vets, I didn't walk away from service without some scars. Mine show up in the form of panic disorder, sudden drops into chaos where my body thinks I'm under attack. My partner Buck is a 90-pound golden retriever trained to pull me back from the edge when my brain spirals. He isn't a pet, he's a medical device with fur, calm as a stone, steady as a sunrise. Buck rests his head on my leg when I start losing control, reminds me to breathe, to stay here. He saved me more times than I can count. When I bought my place in Maplewood Estates, I figured it was a decent suburban community. Clean sidewalks, kids on bikes, neighbors who waved at you from their porches. But what they didn't put in the brochure was Karen Stewart, the HOA president. Picture a perfectly polished woman in her mid-40s, blonde highlights pearls at a community pool party, and a voice that could cut glass. She wasn't just president, she was queen of the block. And she hated Buck the moment she laid eyes on him. It started small. A letter slipped under my door. Pets are not allowed on clubhouse furniture. I thought it was a mistake, so I wrote back politely, explaining Buck was a service dog, that the ADA gave him every right to be by my side, chair included. I even attached the documents, the certification, everything. A week later, another letter arrived, sharper. Bolder, failure to comply will result in fines. Then came the first community meeting. Karen stood up, heels clicking like gunfire, pointed straight at Buck, and said loud enough for the whole room, "That's not a service dog, it's just a spoiled pet. We are not turning this neighborhood into a circus." Some people shifted uncomfortably. A couple chuckled like it was entertainment. I sat there, frozen, every nerve buzzing, while Buck pressed his head against my knee like he knew I was about to explode. I wanted to yell, but instead I spoke slow, steady, showing her the paperwork again. She rolled her eyes and turned away, but the seed of hostility had been planted. Weeks passed and things got worse. One morning, I woke up to a bright orange notice taped to my front door, a fine for unauthorized use of community property. That property was a plastic chair in the clubhouse lobby where Buck sat beside me during a gathering. They had plastered the notice where everyone could see. I felt humiliated, like my entire street had been invited to point fingers at me. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have just kept Buck at home, sat on the floor with him, avoided the clubhouse altogether. That night, I sat in the dark living room, Buck's warm head in my lap, and thought, is this worth it? Maybe I should just sell the house, disappear, and let them win. The silence was heavy, and for a moment I was ready to quit. Then a knock came at the door. My brother Mark, he's a lawyer, stood there with a thick folder under his arm. He dropped it on my table, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Cole, you're not wrong. This isn't about a chair. This is about your rights, and if you give in, they'll steamroll every other person who can't fight back." Inside the folder were pages from the ADA case precedents, even a draft complaint. My pulse slowed. The shame turned into something else, resolve. From that point, I fought back. I started gathering evidence receipts proving I'd paid for Buck's access witness statements from neighbors who saw Karen yelling, even a video of her berating me while Buck sat calmly by my side. For every threat she made, I stacked another page of proof. And slowly, whispers started spreading. The elderly widow down the street told me, "Don't let her bully you, son. She's been pushing people around for years." Others began to nod in agreement. It wasn't just me anymore. Then came the showdown. The HOA called an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was packed, neighbors, board members, and Karen at the head like a judge ready to hand down a sentence. She wasted no time. "We cannot allow chaos," she announced, slamming her palm on the table. "This man is abusing the system. A dog in a chair. It's disgraceful." She turned to me, eyes flashing. "If you don't remove him, we'll remove you." My chest burned, but I stood. My voice shook at first, then steadied as I laid out the documents one by one. The federal law, my medical certification, the video. This isn't about preference, I said. It's about compliance with the law. You're not above it. Karen's face twisted. She snapped, "Don't you dare lecture me. If you don't get rid of that mutt, I'll make sure you lose your house." Gasps rippled through the room. One of the board members muttered, "Karen, that's enough. You're overstepping." But she ignored him, leaning closer, practically hissing. That's when Mark stepped in, calm as a surgeon. He held up a stamped document, an official notice from the State Attorney General's office. It confirmed what we already knew: the HOA was in violation of federal law. Karen's threats weren't just cruel, they were illegal. The board members shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the paper and their furious president. Karen lost it. She slammed the gavel so hard it cracked. "This is my neighborhood," she screamed. But the power had already slipped from her grip. Another board member stood and said firmly, "Effective immediately, the fine is rescinded. And Karen, your position as president is under review." The room erupted not in cheers but in a heavy silence that said it all. The queen had fallen. Karen's face drained of color. She gathered her papers, muttering under her breath, and stormed out. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Buck. She just walked out into the night, and for the first time since this all began, I felt the weight lift. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just reached down, scratched Buck behind the ear, and let out a long breath. Justice had been served not because I shouted louder, but because the truth had finally been louder than her lies. And that's the lesson right there. Bullies thrive on silence, but when you stand your ground with facts, their power crumbles.